in this session, we're going to show you how to take use cases from ideation to activation. And with me, we have Maggie Heatherman, Director of Customer Success at Invoca, as well as Nesby Ingram, Manager of Lead Marketing Technology at DIRECTV. Please give them a warm welcome.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. My name is Maggie. I work at Invoca, which is a revenue execution platform, and we are lucky enough to partner with DIRECTV.
And I'm Nesby, MarTech Manager at DIRECTV, responsible for multi-channel strategy and platform integration. And today we're going to walk you through socializing the idea as well as activating on concepts that scale. I'm going to start us off with a quote from John C. Maxwell: "Change is inevitable, growth is optional." So one of the things and why I show this is because, let's be honest, growth it's not automatic. You have to be super intentional about it, right? So I think this really sets the stage for what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. How many of you have launched a use case that failed? I know I have. And so what we're talking about today is how you can drive success with your use cases. And we've identified 4 pillars to successful use case deployment. And then we'll talk through some results that we've seen in the last year. And then we'll talk about what's next and what's coming. Yep. And then we'll have some time for questions at the end. Awesome. All right, so the 4 pillars to successful deployment are results equal interest. When you can demonstrate the success that you've driven, it makes people more excited. Then platform democratization, and I'm sure that you guys have all run into this before, but if people don't understand the platforms they have access to, they're not going to be successful at coming up with solutions with those platforms. And next, 1 + 1 = 3. And this is really the power of integrating your different technology solutions to drive greater success. And then finally, we'll talk about the anatomy of a use case, because just having an idea is not enough. You really need to be thoughtful and really plan out from start to finish to drive success.
Nice. Well, let's start with pillar 1. Results drive stakeholder interest, right? So people don't invest in ideas, they invest in results. So which means you need some proof, right? You need to show impact. And it's not just an idea or just the potential of, right? Being able to show clear, measurable success builds that credibility and actually helps you scale a lot faster, right? So this slide here kind of speaks to an actual real use case within our call center, where we actually leveraged Invoca, which is our call center intelligence platform that allows us to track for offline calls. So what we did here was we basically took our clickstream data from media to website, right, and sent that through to our call center agents. And what this did for us was basically arming our agents with the right information at the right time about our customers. And what we saw from this was 110% improvement in our agents' close rates, right? And I think this was a wonderful use case that shows how simple but yet very impactful the tool we were able to accomplish with the tool.
And there's no better way to get people excited than make them a little competitive.
Oh, absolutely.
Let them know what other teams are doing, and they want to meet that.
Yep. So next pillar, platform democratization. This is super important. This is one of the things that Mark Luvis, whose team I'm on, preaches, right? And I think this is what and why we've had so much success around the organization. But essentially, a great tool means nothing if people are not going to use it, right? It's not about launching, an initiative and hoping it'll be successful. It's really about getting people to adopt across your organization, right? And so the way we kind of sum it up here is it's making MarTech accessible and actionable across the organization. So this next slide here is what we're saying, scaling success and democratizing across the enterprise, right? Invoca delivers great results, but scaling it was a real challenge. Like, I'll be completely honest there, right? And so we had a framework that we used, and it's 3 P's in an A: platform, process, people, and adoption. That was the formula for scaling, right? And when we aligned these 4 areas, MarTech allowed us to become a driver of efficiency and impact. And so at the end of the day, this wasn't about the tech. It was actually about helping our teams work smarter, move faster, and then being able to just drive great results.
Absolutely. And if people don't understand what the platforms can do, they won't be able to use the platform successfully. So I think that's a really important step.
Absolutely. Which leads us to our next slide: platform democratization again, but now we're focusing on the education process, right? And I think this is super important. Because you have the platform, we know it can do great things, but our teams are not quite sure what its capabilities are. And so, again, I believe tech doesn't really drive the impact, it's education, right? And that's why we kind of focus here on the education and enablement piece. What this does, it ensures that our teams feel confident using the tools, right?
And it probably takes a lot of work off of you too, if they're not having to go direct to you for every question.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a team of 1, right? And so I can only do as much as I can. And quite frankly, your email fills up with a lot of, hey, how do I, can you? And so being able to share and teach and just provide data is, I think, a huge benefit here.
Yeah, and I think the content you guys have created is really great too.
Yeah, and speaking to that, we actually developed an internal wiki, right, of demos and presentations and data dictionaries and all the different things and architectures we've done with the tool. So it allows people to kind of self-serve. So that's one of the things that we did launch in addition.
Yeah.
So this slide here, platform democratization, again here. So we're focusing on just some of the teams that we've worked with, right? So on a previous slide, it showed that we've worked with over 5+ teams across the organization. We've done or rolled out at least 40+ different use cases and projects. And these are some of the teams that we felt that would benefit from our data, as well as the automation and reporting of offline data.
Yeah, and when I think about your business and lots of businesses like you in that considered purchase category, it's really a system. A purchase doesn't just happen. They just don't always go to your website and immediately make a purchase. They're often navigating across different media channels, the website, possibly an app, and then a lot of times they're calling. And so when we make sure all of the pieces of that system understand what's possible, it's a lot more effective.
Yeah, I agree.
So now we're going to talk about 1 + 1 = 3. So any of you who have invested in marketing technology platforms know so much work and money goes into standing these platforms up. And to truly get the value from the platforms, we found that when you have them work together, they're more effective. And I'm sure a lot of you might not be familiar with Invoca, so I'll start with explaining what we do and who we are, and then we'll talk about how we work with Tealium really well. So Invoca as a platform is essentially, it's a way to stitch together that digital journey to the offline channel. And so we do that so all of us in the room, if all 40 of us are on the same page, we're each going to see a different phone number on DIRECTV's website, and that allows us to capture all of this clickstream data. Is it a serviceable address? Is there a product in their cart? Which product is it? Are they a current customer or not? And all of that rich data can inform how we route the call or what the agent talks about with that person. And so all of that data is really session-based. Go to the next slide. And so with Tealium, what you have is those rich customer profiles that include the digital behavior across their life cycle. And it's not limited to one session. But what Tealium's missing is that offline component, when they call and then stitching that back to the digital piece. With Invoca, we have full visibility into that session, And we know what they were doing on the site before they called, but we don't necessarily know, oh, this is a 4-year customer that loves watching local news. And so by integrating Invoca and Tealium, we have that more complete visibility of the customer.
Yep.
So the way that they complement each other are enriching the customer profiles. So like I said, if we know all of that information about what content they're watching, maybe they stop watching content. All of those can enrich what we do with the call. And it allows us to take more informed actions. So if we know that someone is upset because their favorite channel just got removed from the package, we can make a more informed action with how we route that caller. We can improve the caller experience. So if we know that they're calling about an issue that they're trying to troubleshoot, we don't have to ask them 5 questions in the IVR. We can just route them direct to the troubleshooting queue, and we can maybe even pass what step they were on. And it just allows us to drive more effective call center interactions. And then we can also feed that data back into Tealium so that, was that a really positive call? Was it a negative call? Feed that in. Did they convert on the phone? Okay, you probably don't want to send them the same paid search message next time.
Yeah.
All right, so next we'll talk about the anatomy of a use case. So, like I said at the beginning, I'm sure we've all launched a use case that has failed. I know we have. But what we've found is to be successful with a use case, if you're really intentional with your approach, you're more likely to be successful. So the way that we go about it, when we have a use case, the first thing we identify is the business impact. What are we trying to accomplish? Because technology isn't going to be as effective if we aren't defining that from the get-go. And then the other pieces that are important are audience segmentation definitions. Okay, so specifically, which audience are we talking about for this use case? The visitor profile data requirements, and this is a big one because you need to know how we're going to define it, or we're not going to be successful.
That's right. Yeah, the visitor profile data requirements is key, right? So we had to understand, we have all this data, but how do we stitch it with our events and audience profiles within Tealium? So nailing this down was key, especially when we're doing the integrations.
Yeah, and then obviously the most important part, connecting and activating that data.
Yeah.
If we don't disseminate the use case, then it's not going to be as successful. And so really understanding from the get-go what's in scope, where do we need to connect data, and then probably the most important piece is measurement. And I can't tell you how important it is to have measurement defined up front, and then make sure we follow up to do that. And I can think of, there was a use case we launched for one of our stakeholders around bills, and they were just so excited to have visibility into who was calling about bills. They're like, we just want attribution for how many calls we get about billing.
That's right.
And so that we launched that use case, but we didn't have the measurement defined, and so it made it harder then to report back out on what happened.
Yeah, so now we're in a place where we're having to kind of reset a little bit and then kind of define KPIs and what really matters, right? First, it was insight. What are the outcomes, the topics? We're curious on what that is, and so, sometimes we don't always hit it with this anatomy, but we learn, right, and we optimize. And
then the last piece down at the bottom, it's kind of hard to see, but we kind of ranked it on a score of basically how easy is it to get it done, and do we have all of the components we need to be successful? And so if as you're building this use case, it's a great use case, but you don't know who's going to help do it, ease of creation is really difficult, then maybe that's not a use case to prioritize first.
Yeah.
And so thinking about it with that lens has been really helpful in us identifying which use cases to prioritize.
Correct. Some context here. We use this framework when we reach out to our internal stakeholders, and we have a group session. We ideate. We talk about the art of the possible. And so this is kind of what we use to lead that conversation. So we actually have some results that we want to kind of cover just based off of, so we've covered stakeholder buy-in, we've covered democratization, education, we've covered anatomy of a use case, and so now let's kind of dive into some of those numbers. And so I wanted to focus on this integration here because this was foundational for us, right? And in order for anything else to happen, we needed to get the infrastructure kind of established, and that's us sending offline data to Tealium, right? And so what we were able to do with this was, one, to enhance customer profiles. We were able to improve targeting and distributed rich data CAPI to our walled gardens. And so on this slide here, this is, we did a thing, right? We got all the data into Tealium, and our social team executed an A/B test, and basically taking offline sales, right, with our online purchases, and the results were amazing. We saw up to 80% more online stream conversions. We saw up to 70% more online stream conversions, and double the premium calls, right? And then as well as covering our unique reach, that was 80%.
What I love about this story is I can't tell you how many times I have media teams that say, we just want digital conversions. We don't want to encourage call conversions, so we don't want to add that data. But what this use case shows is when you feed the system more data, it gets smarter across the board.
That's right.
And so online sales went up too. And so it wasn't like cannibalizing the digital conversions by adding that data into the system.
I'm super excited about this use case, and what this does in following our framework here is now we can take these results and now we can go to stakeholder groups and we can have a conversation about what we can do for them, right? This kind of puts the bow on what we've been discussing.
This next use case I teased out a little bit earlier. So prioritization of at-risk customers. So we had a channel dispute earlier in the year, and we worked with the teams to set up a use case where when those potential at-risk customers called in, we didn't send them through the standard IVR. We routed them direct to the loyalty queue, who knows how to service them and who is trained on customer empathy and solutions that will help make the customer more satisfied. And so we did an A/B test, and what we saw is for the customers we direct routed, they spent almost 3 minutes less on average in the IVR. And it increased the answer rate, so the amount of people that actually spoke with someone went up 14% versus getting frustrated and hanging up in the IVR.
Yeah. I want to call out one thing. You're probably wondering, how do you take a new platform or a platform in general and then, roadshow it? We do a lot of POCs. That's the common theme here. Invoca allows us to be super nimble, super agile, and allow us to test a lot. And so we've been able to generate a lot of success by doing these POCs with our teams. And they're like, when we go and we talk to our stakeholders, they're like, hey, we want to do this. And we're like, hey, let us test it for you. And then we come back, and then that's when we get that buy-in. So just wanted to make sure I called that out because that is another point to our success, which being able to generate those proof of concepts.
Yeah.
So
what's next?
What's next? This is what we're really excited about from a Tealium standpoint, but in efforts of drumming up, more relevant use cases, I think where we are now is, how can we leverage Moments API, right? And this is to retrieve that high-performing data in real time. And what this actually does for us to be able to drive more website personalization, more real-time data enrichment, as well as being able to kind of serve experiences for the unauthenticated profile, right? That user that comes that may be a customer, may not be a customer, but they're not logged in. How do you actually provide content and experiences or, certain attributes, right, to be able to target? And so that's kind of where we are with regards to what's next for us. I feel like we've explored quite a bit. We've done quite a bit. We've been super successful. And this is what has worked for us.
Yeah. All right. I think that's it.
Yeah.
Any questions?
No, that's a great question, and we experienced some of that, right? And we're still having conversations about what's the right data that we put in front of our agents, right? So we started with, it's funny, we threw everything, calling page, page interest, product, what was in cart, zip code, segments, our audience segments, and then we went from there and started to kind of drill down on what was super important. And that's what was left. But it was a learning process, and to your point, working with those teams and understanding their challenges regarding what the agent is actually doing, what they're scored and graded on, handle time, you're right, it's a screen pop within their console, and it can be distracting. So we wanted to make sure, and that's working with our media teams, right, who's driving the traffic, working with our call center teams and making sure that we're in alignment in what we provide.
And that's another piece where the education and the training is so important.
Yeah.
I've seen that time and time again, where when the call center teams aren't fully enabled on why and what, they might not execute in the way that they're supposed to. So that's definitely a critical piece.
And I'll be honest, I've pushed back on some things, made recommendations, and why? Because this is data they didn't have before. They may not know what campaign it came from, if it was paid search, if it was satellite, if it was stream, or any of those. It's just a call in their eyes and what they see in their console. So, for us, it's, we're giving you this data, right? It's impactful, it's usable. Let's work with the constituents to be able to leverage this data. Yes.
Yep. So the bridging unknown and known users, right? So I wonder, clearly it says next step. I wonder if, have you started, would you be able to share some early directions you're going, the approaches and all that?
Not quite. First step for us was making the connection. We did that. We basically sent all of our offline call data, anything that we could throw at Tealium, and basically configured an event stream to start to pick up some of that data. Our biggest focus was just that offline copy of just sending, our customer data downstream, as far as like a hash phone number or something of that nature to be able to make the match. But other than that, we haven't explored. This is still new for us, so we're looking forward to see where and how and why. Do you have a feedback on that?
One use case that we're talking about, so when you look at, I think the data that we were looking at the other day, about 20% of calls from the website are known and authenticated, and about 80% are unknown and unauthenticated. So one of the things we're exploring is through Invoca's integration with Genesis, can we identify that caller and then pass that back into Tealium to make that unknown person known. Yeah. And so that's something we're exploring. Not fully scoped. We literally talked about it 2 days ago.
No, and that's
but
fair.
It's an exciting idea, I think.
And that's where this whole conversation has led us around. We did a thing, we have the data, now it's time for us to go roadshow and find some new use cases and how we leverage this data, right? And so this is typically how we start out, where we gotta lay the infrastructure first.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we have quite a few use cases that are the possible that we're ready to explore.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I think we have time for maybe one quick one.
Ease of execution and having the right stakeholders, I think are two, and having a measurable outcome are really kind of the top ones that I think we thought about when we were executing.
That anatomy of a use case helps us a lot, right? Because it allows us to identify, all the stakeholders, how easy is it to use, who do you need to reach out to, and it all kind of aligns around your business and your processes, right? What does it take to get something stood up or developed? But we do go for the easy wins at first, right? Things that we know we can do quicker. And honestly, from a MarTech point of view, that's what makes us successful, is these SaaS platforms that allow us to be flexible and nimble to get those easy wins. Yep. All right, thank you. We appreciate it. That concludes our presentation.
Guys.